Hello everybody, it's Wyvern here with a video to discuss the upcoming Doomsayer patch and everything that's sort of going to be changed in the game. Now, obviously, the patch is pretty big. There's the new DLC, the new free LC, and then a whole bunch of changes to existing factions and existing campaign mechanics, and so there's a lot of space to cover. There's a lot of stuff to cover. I'm going to try to be as quick and concise as I can be. I do want to sort of pitch in what I think is going to change, especially as far as multiplayer meta goes. Just leave my thoughts and comments. But if all you're interested in really is the patch notes, I'll be sure to leave a link down in the description below so you guys don't have to listen to me rant if you don't want to. But regardless, let's kind of hop right in and get right to the meat of the matter. We're going to go through the campaign stuff first, and then we are going to go through the multiplayer or unit changes and sort of see what's going on. So regardless, obviously they did give us a nice little chart here alongside the patch. The DLC, we already know what's coming. We know it's good old Ikit as well as 10-1. We got new mechanics, new battle mass. When it says new battle mass, what I think that means is just quest battles are new. But besides that, well, we already kind of know what's coming with 10-1 and Ikit. Lots of new stuff. New mechanics in the campaign, including Sacrifice to Sotek and Forbidden Workshop and all that stuff. We're also getting a free LC Legendary Lords Tic-Tac-Toe, who is, of course, the Lizardman Lord oriented towards flyers. And there isn't much else to be really said for him. It's a cool addition, but we've already gone over that previously, and there's plenty of info on him around. Now, as for the actual update, well, the major things to touch on here is that Bretonnia is getting a rework. That's not as big of a rework as what, in my opinion at least, as what the Vampire counts received. Perhaps more on par with, say, what the Dwarf changes were. But they are getting a new vow system, some new item missions for their Legendary Lords, which is really cool. I don't know if that means they're going to get new items for their Legendary Lords, or if it simply means that there's some additional missions in there on the path to their legendary items. But regardless, it is cool to see that they've been given some improvements there. They're also getting new technologies. More importantly, though, it's mostly new or a rework of the technology tree that exists, making it easier, I think, to play Bretonians in different ways. You can be more aggressive against, for example, Wood Elves, or you can try to be nice to them and try to get along. So there's different ways you can take it. The Green Knight has been tweaked. That does mean we'll be going over these in more depth later on, but the Green Knight has been tweaked. He now does. You can potentially have an infinite amount of Green Knight summons in the late game. That doesn't mean you get infinite amount of Green Knights, but you can resummon him over and over. And Alberic has been reworked. Now the most garbagey Legendary Lord in the Bretonnia, and arguably the whole game. It will hopefully be a little less garbagey, so we'll see how he performs after the update. Besides that, Lord Croak has been added for the Lizardman. He's got his own quest chain to get him. He's the legendary hero who's got some pretty awesome battlefield support spells, and he's got some great impact on the campaign map as well. Once again, he comes with a new quest map, which is kind of cool. Skaven are getting an Under Empire mechanic, basically like Vampire Coves, but it's more like an actual city instead of just a one-off settlement, so that's definitely very cool. You've basically got a city underneath a city, and that's very Skaven-y, very sort of lore-friendly in my opinion, and definitely I'm very excited to see how that plays out, especially with the Doom Sphere being able to nuke an entire enemy city with Ikit. Just sounds hilarious. There's also been changes to the campaign map, new regions, new provinces, as well as some additional amendments and whatnot. So there's been definitely some cool stuff to be had. Though obviously a lot of that is probably just with the new regions being added in. They had to change stuff. Besides that, we do have some nice little update highlights listed here. And we're kind of going to be going over these in a little more depth later down the road. But there's been some major campaign AI adjustments. There's also been some new provinces added, including the Massive Orcal in Bretonnia and new regions of the Empire, one of which is the Ruins of Mordheim, or Mordheim. And then the Vampire Count AI factions actually now get sort of themed Bloodline Lords. So Musion is going to be getting Blood Dragons, the Necrarch Brotherhood is going to get Necrarchs, Strigos Empire is going to get Strigoi, and Silver Host is going to be getting the Lamine Lords. So that's very awesome to see. Just see that extra additional layer of customization options and variety added to the game. There's also new island map variations, which is kind of nice to see, as well as new ritual currency locations in the Isle of Vortex, so the new factions can actually play that campaign properly. You can also now actually find your lord on the where he is on the map on your selection screen, which is definitely nice. A good improvement, I think. That's one of those nice things that's in multiplayer, and you never get that in single player. It's like, where am I supposed to start? They've also reduced the availability time of all agents to, well, they're tier 3 or below now, which is very nice. It means that you're going to be able to get your heroes going a lot sooner, hopefully. Hopefully we're going to be able to level them up and improve them a lot quicker into the game. Feral Cold Ones have also been added to Lizardmen, so that's kind of cool. They're actually a recruitable unit now instead of just a summon that you get on a campaign map or a unit getting customed. Now as for the big changes, and these are the campaign AI overhauls especially, and these are some big changes in my opinion. First and foremost, auto-resolve bonuses for playable and horde factions have been removed entirely. So this is crazy. Before, this was a huge change, a huge sort of impactful thing in campaign. The AI-controlled major factions would often just steamroller the minor factions. They just crush them. They'd have those stupid auto-resolve bonuses and do really, really well. So we're going to see how this works out now. If there's going to be more balanced gameplay, if we're going to see some more well-rounded situations, or if it's going to if we're going to have a new sort of plague affecting us now. So it's definitely very cool to see this. Definitely going to be interesting to see how this works out. They've also changed how AI is going to spend its money, hopefully more efficiently based on this description. So that's definitely another good improvement. And they've also removed, and this is actually another huge change, the public order bonuses for AI. So supposedly AI is going to actually construct public order buildings now, which is awesome. But it's really nice to see that they've removed those public order bonuses, because before there were quite a few factions, especially vampire accounts, where a huge part of your gameplay was supposed to be that you sort of corrupt your neighbors and you spread your vampiric corruption and you reduce their control and make them have riots or rebellions constantly and just be a nuisance. But that was kind of gimped with because they just have public order bonuses, so they would just shrug it off unless you had like 99% corruption or some crap. They would basically never really experience public order issues. So now this will hopefully be a big change. Stack this on top of the fact that auto-resolve bonuses were removed from major factions, and what we might actually see now is that rebellions, if you're able to instigate a rebellion in enemy territory, you might actually be able to get some nasty value out of it, for sure, which would really be pretty cool to see. They've also reworked the Vampire Coast so that it's less expansionistic. So now instead of capturing places and trying to actually conquer the map, it's going to be trying to raise, sack, and establish pirate coves, which is much more, I think, in line with how Vampire Coast should function. They're a pirate faction after all. They're not a bunch of conquerors. They're not looking to dominate the world. So definitely, I think it's a reasonable thing to do. AI is also supposedly not going to build multiple surplus buildings. So you're not going to see the AI spamming the same building over and over and over again when they don't need those buildings. So definitely a big improvement there. Also, reduced likelihood that AI is going to spam agents in one army, because previously you'd often see AI armies where they just have like half a dozen or whatever heroes, and oftentimes those heroes are just nonsensical, and the AI just flunks even worse than usual. So seeing that the AI is going to spread out its hero core, definitely very nice to see. There's also been improvements to unit recruiting templates for Empire, Bretonnia, Skaven, Dark Elves, High Elves, and Lizardmen, so hopefully we'll see some more well-rounded rosters instead of mono builds spamming the same crap over and over. And we're definitely going to see how this works out exactly. But I'm actually very excited about these changes for our campaign, because a lot of this could potentially just spice things up a lot, make things much more balanced and much more sort of interesting to play. The smarter AI, I think, is a lot better than a stupid cheating AI. So definitely excited to see that. We're also getting new AI factions, Clan Fester and Mange, and then Leafcutter's Tribe. The two Skaven clans are in Lustria, most likely to give 10 and 1 a proper bit of competition, and Leafcutter's Tribe in the Southlands, I assume, might be near Tic-Tac-Toe, though we'll definitely see where exactly they're positioned. Maybe it's going to be somewhere else, but this should definitely spice things up down there as well. Now, besides that, the Skaven Under Empire has been added. We already knew that. So this is basically a pirate cove that can be discovered and demolished. By the look of it, you don't get to protect it if it gets discovered. So I guess it's not like a city battle. If your opponent discovers it, they just destroy it. So that's definitely a bit risky, and depending on how exactly that works out, this could be a bad thing. We'll see for sure. Personally, I wouldn't mind if you could like defend the Under Empire, but if there's like a high level of RNG that you're just gonna get discovered and screwed, I could see it not being that appealing of a mechanic. Unfortunately. Besides that, building changes, and some of these I think are honestly bad. So some of them definitely good improvements. For example, the Warpfire Throwers now only require the engineering level 1 building rather than the level 2 building. That's a good improvement, I think. More fire throwers are already kind of a lackluster unit to begin with new weapons teams more so. Hopefully this puts them in a decent spot, at least okay. Kroxigors, though, and Pterodons with Fire Leech Bolas have been moved from level 3 to level 4. Both building chains now got a level 4 structure. And I think this is a not good change. I think it's a not so good change in the case of the Kroxigors, but an absolutely god-awful change in the case of the Pterodons. And I'm not entirely sure if the Ripperdactyls are tier 3 for all factions. I do believe I saw them being tier 3 in the building menu for the Lizardmen. But if that's the case, then Pterodons with Fire Leech Bolas are basically useless. Like you're not going to go invest in those if you can get Ripperdactyls at tier 3. And I think so. Fire Leech Bolas are honestly a unit that should be tier 2. They're a pretty god awful unit. They don't do much damage against even clumped up infantry, especially for the fact that they're taking up an army slot. You're better off with a unit, basically any other unit as lizards. And the fact that they're going to be level 4 now, like pure level 4, not just requiring a level 4 building, means that you have to build them in a major settlement. Even though they don't have that secondary building requirement anymore, having to build your Pterodon structure in a separate building just to get Fire Leech Bolas is just stupid. Same with Kroxigors. You don't really like. Granted, the venerable or the elder salamander is going to be level 4 as well. But still, you don't necessarily. You can just kind of skip Kroxigors and the salamander and cap out at tier 3. And I'm not sure. I'm thrilled to see this. I think it is okay, and Kroxigors already needed tier 4 building to sort of be built, but I'm not too thrilled about them moving up to tier 4. And the Pterodons especially, I just think is a horrible choice to put them to tier 4 because they just don't belong there. They're not a tier 4 unit. They're not even a tier 3 unit, honestly. The only reason I think they should be tier 3 maybe is because they're an upgrade from normal Pterodons, but I don't know. I think this is a very bad choice. Besides that, the Bastiladon, Rev Crystal, and Solar Engine have now been bound to alternate building chains, and they've got a prerequisite to have the Beast building chain. So I think that's actually a pretty cool choice. It definitely sort of spices things up. If you want, say, the Rev Crystal, you now have to build the Sodic chain. If you want the Solar Engine, you got to build the old one chain, which is, so that's definitely cool to see. You still have to build your Beast building. I don't think it's going to be too troubling because honestly, you already usually built these structures in your Lizardman settlements. So definitely should be okay. And then the Feral Cold ones have been added, which we noted before. So that could be useful. That could give the Lizards a little bit of early game cav. We'll definitely see how that plays out. Now besides that, new regions. And there's a lot of these. In the Vortex, we're getting a whole bunch of new stuff in the coast of Lustria. As well as the Culcan Plains. The Volcanic Islands are getting reworked and getting a whole bunch of new regions. There's a whole bunch of new regions now in the northern Red Rivers, as well as some in the southern Red Rivers. Even new settlement here in the Capes. So definitely quite a big sort of rework in IR Vortex. But what I'm really excited about is actually the changes in Mortal Empires. So they added Massive Orcal to the Bretonnian territories, and this is going to be an orc-controlled province, but from what I've gathered. And the nice thing about this is it means that now, if as Bretonia, you don't want to spend the first 20 turns of your game suffering -20 public order, getting beaten up on or by everybody and trolled by greenskins, having to basically farm them for money and XP. If you actually just want to knock those greenskins out and get on with your game, you can now go to Massive Orcal, knock those darn greenskins out, and be done with it. So I think that's a big improvement. For Bordello and the Fae especially. Obviously, Lewin's always had the Skull Smashers to crush within like 2 turns, so that wasn't a problem for him. But for the other two, I think this will be a good improvement. Empire also, because Empire used to have a big problem with incredibly empty provinces, massive empty provinces that were very difficult to control, that very difficult to protect. Oftentimes, trying to reinforce from one city to another would take multiple turns, and it was just ridiculous. Well, now it's especially the more empty settlements are being filled out. So you can see Ostermark here getting Naganov and Mordheim. So they're going up from 2 to 4 region province. Same with Talbotland getting Kappelberg and Krugenheim. So new regions being given. Talbotland especially was a ridiculously overstretched province. So them being able to now get more settlements in there, and hopefully that'll stabilize things a little, make Talbotland a little easier to manage, also a little easier to deal with. If your opponent decides to come in and start like corrupting your territory and you need to go chasing after enemies, it'll hopefully be easier to deal with that sort of crap now that these new settlements have been added. There's also been some small changes to the Western Jungle, which I do believe was fairly annoying to navigate prior. So the addition of Tlaka and Quixote there should be a big improvement. Wellsprings of Eternity added to the Jungle of Green Mist, and perhaps also importantly, a mountain pass was added to the western mountain range of the Spine of Sotek, so to connect the Spine of Sotek and the Huahuan Desert. So I think that's going to be a big improvement. I think this is going to help a lot because that region is kind of frustrating to try to access. I remember playing as Mazdamundi in a co-op campaign I was doing, and trying to conquer the Huahuan Desert area was just such a pain in the rear because I had to like march an army down, and then that army had to march all the way back up and around the mountain. So I think if this is the region I'm thinking about, I definitely think this will be a big improvement. Character skills have been revised a little bit. Azag Skullmuncher is now available from rank 14, which is a huge buff, definitely a big improvement. Very happy to see that. Besides that, mounts have been separated, the cold ones and horned ones, stegodons and ancient stegodons. And perhaps one of the biggest skill revisions here and one of the most useful is that Oath Gold is now a 2-point skill rather than a 3-point skill that ends up generating 6 Oath Gold a turn once you hit the second tier as a Rune Lords and Runesmiths, which is really, really nice to see. Besides that, there's not too much changes here in the miscellaneous stuff. This is one... Most of this like quality of life stuff, like adding cooldown displays for agent action and stuff. But the Reiksguard losing the Smith requirement, I think, is a horrible decision. Not just a bad one, a pretty freaking horrible one. So Reiksguard are tier 3. They share tier 3 with Empire Knights. The only thing they've got as a downside compared to Empire Knights is that they require a unique building. You get the Reiksfort versus the Empire Knights, who require the main stable tree. So if you get Reiksguard, it's a segue away from just getting all your other Empire cap like Demigryphs in the long run. The problem is that Reiksguard are head and shoulders better than Empire Knights. There's basically no access to Knights of the Blazing Sun in campaign. Getting Talbotland and leveling it up is an absolute pain in the rear. So your Reiksguard are basically uncontested there already. And the fact that now there's no Smith requirement for Reiksguard makes them an even more optimal choice in campaign. And I think that's honestly horrible. It means that Empire Knights, unless they would also lose this Smith requirement or were somehow changed, Empire Knights are in a horrible spot. They're completely useless. They're legitimately one of the worst useless campaign units in the game. And I say this as someone who plays a lot of Empire. Probably about half my campaigns are Empire. And seeing this, Reiksguard didn't need any more incentive to be picked in a campaign over Empire Knights. I just think this is horrible, honestly. Poor Empire Knights. They're really getting shafted there. And then Blessed Spawnings. They've actually been reworked in what I think is a good way. There's only 4 types of Blessed Spawning missions now instead of the prior bajillion. I don't know. There was a bunch of different requirements. Sometimes you'd have to get like trade agreements or non-aggression pacts and crap. And that was incredibly difficult and sometimes just straight up impossible. You'd have to earn like 5,000 gold a turn, and you'd get a mission like that on turn 2 or something. So it's like you're never going to get that. So now it's all about battle captives, killing entities, raise and sack, and defeating armies. So that is a huge improvement, very big improvement, and I think this is definitely going to make it much easier to get your Blessed Spawnings. What is kind of cool, though, is that the requirements actually scale. So late game requirements for Blessed Spawnings are higher than they are in early game. So I think that's actually a very good improvement. I think this is... I just think it's a good way to do Blessed Spawning, so that's an improvement there. As far as battle changes go, Bartered Wars was removed from custom battles, which doesn't matter. Who cares? Nobody uses that anyway. You can now skip cutscenes normally without any bugs. And then Alberic's been given a weapon, trident as a weapon, which is nice, but not that important. Bretonnians have also been given a vow system now. This is a whole setup where you got to complete certain missions to unlock your different vow skills. So it's no longer that you just level up your lord and then pick that you get your knight's vow, your questing vow, and your grail vow. Now you actually got to work for it. And so it'll be interesting to see. This could make life difficult, especially because Bretonnia is so cav dependent. So if you're being crippled by vow requirements, this can be frustrating, but maybe it'll be good. One big buff to Bretonnia, though, was the removal of secondary building requirements for all their units. So now you can get everything from men-at-arms to shields to foot squires to Pegasus Knights to peasant bows to fires without needing your armories or carpenters buildings. So that's a huge improvement. Previously, this was one of the most annoying things about Bretonia. Like, there was no reason ever, in my opinion, when I played campaign, I never bought men at arms with shields. Why? Because I need to get a separate building. I basically just recruit a handful of spear men at arms from men at arms, sell that building because it was garbage, and get battle pilgrims because you couldn't get access to these units effectively. So I think this is a big improvement. Also, with peasant bows, this make them much more viable. And the armory building chain will still be providing buffs to recruitment rate, both globally and locally. It's also going to be providing, I think it's like plus 10 armor and plus 10 melee defense to local armies, and plus 2 armor globally. So that's very, very strong. Imagine your Grail Guardians being buffed by, like, you just get like 5 armory buildings, and your Grail Guardians are going to be up to 130 armor. So that's a big improvement. That can be a tangible effect there. Bretonians also did get new techs, which we already touched on a little bit before. Most of this is most of these tech changes are simply reductions in time consumed to complete whatever research it is. They have increased the income bonuses for economy types, which is really nice. And there's some new diplomacy boosts with Wood Elves, Tomb Kings, and factions like that, which is definitely kind of cool to see. Peasant mobs obviously have no upkeep now when you're not over the peasant economy cap. Could be useful in early games just to get that extra bit of crap on the field. Some diplomacy changes. There's no more war between Carcassonne and Ivries early on. That said, Carcassonne and Bordelot are both now at war with the Dread Fleet right off the bat. There's also a new conflict between Bordelot and Certosa, and the Lizardmen now have better mutual sort of respect, I guess. There's less aversion rate between AIs and improved improved affinity for internally friendly AIs, which is definitely nice. Finally, there's some new Confederation dilemmas that trigger after you research heraldry, which can allow you to instantly get instant but costly confederations, which is definitely interesting. We're gonna see how that works out. I think that could be very good, just fast, because now you can research everything in like within 4 turns, all your heraldry. And so you could easily get a very quick confederation potentially, and that would be pretty awesome. As mentioned before, Green Knight is now available longer for 25 turns instead of 15. He's now not really effective as an agent at all, but he's immune to assassinations, and you can get him repeatedly once you hit level 5 chivalry, which is awesome. Basically, this makes the Green Knight a pure combat hero. Definitely, I think, a big improvement. Still not sure it's that awesome because he is still a temporary hero, so having to delete a unit or kick a unit from your army just to make room for the Green Knight is kind of annoying. But I guess what you could do is like run a Prophetess as your lord, or maybe the Fey Enchantress. Have a Paladin running along with your army. And whenever you recruit the Green Knight, you swap him in instead of the Paladin, have the Paladin sort of escort, do assaults or whatever, and then swap him back in once the Green Knight expires, maybe. So something along that nature. Bretonian Lords now all get barded horses as a base. Same with the damned Paladins. That's pretty cool. New Bretonian garrisons. This was actually a huge improvement. Now Bretonian garrisons get foot squires at like tier 2, which is just an awesome buff. It's going to make them way more competitive. As mentioned before, the massive recall is going to help with the incursion event, and there's been some improvements to income, improvements to economy buildings, added effects to the smithy and carpentry, which we discussed prior. The carpentry actually unlocks your trebuchets, so it's still a valuable building. The smithy is more about the upgrades now. And now, Kemmler also doesn't get starting corruption when he's AI controlled, which should make life as Bretonia a bit more manageable. Hopefully, we'll see, but hopefully Kemmler's going to be a little bit less of a pain. Now, as for audio, because this is totally the most important thing, rattling guns will now sometimes be overcome with verminous glee when firing. They cut out the tongues for the council guard. And when casting, the screaming bell now makes bigger bongs to please Torn Rat. But in all seriousness, most of these are just silly. It's sound improvements. It's nice. It's a nice little improvement for an immersion standpoint, but nothing too important, I guess. Same thing here, basically some improvements to diplomacy and stances and all that sort of stuff, just aesthetics and that sort of thing. There's also been some spell and unit challenge reworks. They rebalanced all vortex, breath, wind, and explosion abilities. So apparently there's been a bug that was making them use reduced radius for area of effect, and that was fixed. The biggest change, of course, is that summons are now limited in duration. They are no longer unbreakable, so undead can now crumble. Living units can all rout. There's been some adjustments to power cost. We'll see how much exactly that is later. But they've also redesigned Unbinding to instead do damage and later huge amounts of damage. It's now just simply going to mean that your unit will expire and instantly die after a set amount of time. And there's no way you can keep them afloat with Invocations in the Heck. You can't keep them around any longer than that. So that's, I think, a very good improvement. Summons were honestly broken OP for like the vast majority of factions, except Skaven, who were the only ones who didn't have unbreakable summons. So I think this is a big improvement for sure. As for, you can also see all the numbers here on how long units are going to last. Not much to be said there. I honestly don't really have many, if any, comments on these units. To be quite honest with you guys, there's just simply been some changes. Now the Vargulf and the Manticore only cost 13 power. So that is definitely a bit of a reduction. Denizens of the Deep has actually gone up, I believe. It used to be 11, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe it's gone down. Maybe it was 13. I forget what exactly its cost was. Savage Dominion is actually a huge buff, I guess. The Cygor used to be, well, it's a sort of buff. The Cygor used to cost 26 Winds of Magic. Now it's down to 15. So it's a lot cheaper. And it is now a lot more, well, it doesn't last as long. Raised Dead has also been nerfed a huge amount and now costs 4 Winds of Magic instead of 3. And its cooldown is 39 seconds, so you're not going to be able to spam Undead for days. Same with the Raised Dead, improved the skeletons. They've only got 80 seconds duration, and they cost 6 Winds of Magic, so that is an insane increase to their penalization there. So definitely, this is the right track, in my opinion. This is absolutely the right thing to do. But we'll see if it's maybe even too much of a nerf. But there haven't been other nerfs really to Undead, so hopefully it sort of balances out. Besides that, now for units, and this is where we get into multiplayer stuff and what I really enjoy. Dark Elves, mostly armor changes. Charybdis and Hydra got +10 armor. Makes sense, honestly. Saurus, who are running around butt naked with like a shield, or getting, or not even a shield in some cases, get 60 armor. Why a Hydra shouldn't have 60 armor either doesn't really make sense. So I think this will be good. It'll hopefully make those units a little tankier. Of course, and it's not actually, it's actually listed further down. Primal Instincts was reworked, so it now only triggers at 20% HP and actually gives the unit more melee attack and charge bonus. So with that, for the Dark Elves, all their Cold One Knights and Dread Knights and Chariots took nerfs to stats, obviously to compensate. I do think they should just increase their cost, but hey, I'll take whatever I can get. Knights of the Ebon Claw also went down in price because obviously they didn't have Rampage or the Primal Instincts to begin with, and so it would be less. They don't really get any benefit from this change, so them losing attack and defense has to be compensated for with some changes to cost. Hellebron's been slightly improved with more melee defense, which I think is fairly irrelevant. Canine Assassins have been given Vanguard deploy and more run speed, as well as projectiles doing poison, which I think is pretty nasty. Could make him a good kiting tool. Bolt Fiends are a bit cheaper now, and Blackheart Corsairs are slightly better versus infantry. So some slight improvements here, some quality of life tweaks. I think the Dark Elves are going to get a huge buff just because of the improvements to Primal Instincts. I think that's actually going to be a huge change for them, and actually going to make them even more powerful than they already are. But at the same time, I don't think it should be something too overwhelming. We'll definitely have to sort of keep track of it. But I think the Dark Elves will be in an okay spot, but definitely a bit better than before. As for the High Elves, some big changes here. So the Noble Chariot's been nerfed, though I don't think anywhere near enough. -10 charge bonus and 2 melee defense is not really that relevant to the Chariot. Heroic Chariots rely more on their weapon strength to do boatloads of damage, and that isn't untouched here. The Lore Master of Hoth is now much cheaper, which is good, because he was kind of underutilized and very limited in function. All dragons were given +10 armor, or not all dragons, but all the cheaper dragons, the Moon Dragons and the Sun Dragons, gained 10 armor. Interestingly enough, the Prince gets a Sun Dragon, and it seems that he does not get +10 armor. So that is interesting to see, that the Prince's Sun Dragon doesn't get armor, unless that was just simply missed and forgotten about. Lithanar was buffed, he's more accurate. and does more damage, which I think is good. Alithanar was definitely on the trashier end of the spectrum, so seeing him buffed a bit should definitely make him a little better. Swordmaster of Hoeth got some leadership, which was requested, I believe, on the forums. I personally don't think they needed it, but you know, it's okay. It's not. I don't think it's a crazy buff. Frostheart Phoenix, just a huge buff to melee attack. Well, not melee attack so much as the weapon strength. And some nerfing to charge bonus. Hopefully makes it a little better at combat. Illyrian Reavers are cheaper, and Loremaster of Hoeth. I don't even know why Loremaster of Hoeth has 2 entries here, but it's just 150 cost reduction. I don't think Illyrian Reavers deserve 50 cost reduction, to be quite honest. They're a very good light cav. They're incredibly potent. Probably one of the best light cav out there. As is for their cost. Like their price point, they only cost 600 gold, and they are stupidly effective. If we looked at like Total War stats, you definitely see like in comparison to everything else, they're stupidly good. And I don't think they deserve this buff, but we'll see. Perhaps it'll make them a little more popular, but I don't think they need it. It's just that Illyrian Reaver archers are so good. It's not that Illyrian Reavers themselves are bad. So I think that's a mistake. Volkmar got a buff to melee defense. I think it makes sense. He's kind of not very picked because the Archlector is so good, and he's got low armor, and for whatever reason, Volkmar is not a boss in combat, even though he kind of is that way in lore. Volkmar on the Chariot now also gets a bonus for his infantry, and it's a little cheaper, which is nice to see. Hellblaster is a smidge more accurate, which is not too important, I think. But the Witch Hunter's got a big change. Accusation no longer does damage. Instead, it's basically like the Ulthar's Raiders debuff. Drops enemy armor by 30, melee defense by 26, and missile resist by 22 for 35 seconds. And this is pretty awesome. This can synergize with basically anything Empire does. If you're doing a cav heavy build, if you're relying on your cav or your infantry, like your greatswords or something, this makes them much more effective. You're relying on Empire Swordsmen. You need to debuff some enemy troops, make them a little more vulnerable. You can debuff them. You're relying on your shooting. You want to do some damage into like Kolek or more damage into Kolek or whatever. Boom. Missile resist debuff, armor debuff. So this is a great hex. I could see it being very powerful. Obviously, the Witch Hunter not the greatest in combat on his own, so I think this will be very strong. I think it's definitely better than the way Accusation was before. It makes a lot more sense lore-wise, and it is going to require more skill from the player. Empire's already fairly high skill action. They high skill floor, high skill ceiling, but I think this just synergizes so much better. I'm really happy to see this. Steam Tank also got a 2 melee attack, which is basically irrelevant, but hey, it's something. Maybe one day in like 10 years, the Steam Tank will be actually good. If you can't tell I'm salty, oh well. Regardless, moving on, the Greenskins had some big changes. Both Grimgor and Skarsnik got more health. There was some change to the Wyvern being buffed. So instead of attacking slower, it's now should attack at the recommended or expected attack speed. So I'm getting a buff, guys. I should be a lot better now. But the changes to HP on Grimgor and Skarsnik didn't really deserve it, in my opinion. Grimgor, though, definitely makes sense. I still don't think Grimgor's going to be good, but hey, it's something. Giants are now faster for all factions, so that's on the right track, I think. It'll make them a little better, for sure. Giants' low mobility is one of their crippling weaknesses. Doom Divers are now AP-oriented rather than non-AP, so that's definitely going to be a big buff for them. And the Arachnaroks now get plus 14 bonus versus large, so perhaps looking into the fact that Greenskins have huge issues with big, large targets with lots of armor, CA is looking to make the Ragnarok more of a large killer, and you know it kind of makes sense. Big nasty spiders sort of jumping whatever and stabbing you with poison could be pretty nasty. We'll definitely see how that plays out. Now the dwarves, I don't even know why that's popping up, but the dwarves got some changes as well here, and honestly, this is one of the, I don't know how to put this. These changes almost feel like a mockery in some ways, to be quite blunt. Not all of them, some of them are good, but some of these changes are pretty stupid. Belagar is getting 400 health. That is not what we need. Like, right now, dwarf legendary lords are garbage because they've got very little utility and they're incredibly expensive. So the solution they're giving us is that Belagar now has more health. He's also got an ability change, I think, slightly. Now he can use Revenge Incarnate more often and it doesn't last as long. But nobody wants more health on Belagar. We want him to have more utility. The guy's already tanky. Nobody gives a darn about Dwarf Lords, really. Nobody tries to snipe him because it's a waste of time. Dwarf leadership is already ridiculous as is. So the fact that Belagar's getting more HP is basically irrelevant. He needs to be cheaper or he needs to have some more utility. Same with Thorgrim, who's getting more melee attack, more 8 health, a smidge more damage, and some more armor. Literally none of these things matter for Thorgrim. It just makes it harder for him to get value out of his high king buff that already never procs almost because nobody focuses him. And then Ungrim, who's getting more health, at least a little more melee defense, will help him a little bit and sustained fighting if you just throw him into an infantry blob, but it's not really what he needs. Grumbrindle's price drop, I think, is in the right direction, especially because Flash Bomb is being fixed. And then, though, to add insult to injury, the one competitive Dwarf Lord, the Rune Lord, is being nerfed with a cost increase. So honestly, I would say 2 of these changes are absolute garbage. Like, you don't need more HP on Belegar or Thorgrim. What they really need is more utility. They need to bring something to the table, a proper improvement to the table. And they don't, which is why they're unpopular. They're incredibly expensive for what they do. And making them tankier does not fix that issue at all. It doesn't do anything. And I sound a little salty. I'm not even a dwarf. I don't play dwarves very much. I don't really enjoy the dwarf playstyle too much. But the fact that this is how they're approaching the problem by the way CA just completely missed the problem with the dwarf legendary lords here, in my opinion, or a lot of the problem with the legendary lords, is just kind of sad. And the fact they nerfed the Rune Lord, it just adds insult to injury. Hammers at least got more melee defense, which is nice. Gyrocopters got a big buff to their accuracy and damage, which I think is a big improvement. Extra AP and extra projectile damage, definitely very nice. Actually, I think that's definitely on the right track. Brimstones, I think, need a little slight tweak. This might be what they needed. And Giant Slayers are dropping in cost, so I think that's good. Those are definitely some good changes. Vampire Coast got some nerfs. Drop in armor for Morngulls, Night Terrors, Noctilus. Also actually lost some health, so definitely some good nerfs there. The Morgul Haunter also lost some armor and some melee attack. I don't actually think these nerfs are enough, but I think it's definitely on the right track to put these units where they belong. And I do understand that CA is being a little cautious with some of these changes. I don't blame him for that. I think that's a good way to go. Zombie gunnery mobs are also losing 2 health per entity and some more melee defense. I think this is also good. They're kind of still OP, so them being a little squishier again is going to hopefully make them less ridiculous. Hand cannons also being a little toned down, though I don't actually think hand cannons are that crazy right now. I don't really think this was necessary. Lamprey's Revenge also going up in cost. Makes sense. This unit's become really oppressive. So with the improvements to hand cannons especially. So good change. Now the vampire accounts. Well, once again, I'd say this is like an out-of-touch fix. The Vargeists and the Devils of Schwarzhofen are getting a buff to damage and charge. Except that's not what Vargeists had a problem with. Vargeists already do ridiculous amounts of damage. The problem is that they're squishy as all heck, so they roll over and die the moment anything glares at them. And this does nothing to fix that. Sure, you might kill stuff a smidgen faster, but it's not going to make this unit super appealing in most matchups anyway. And I think that's just a missed mark there completely. Karen Wraiths getting more melee attack makes sense. Karen Wraiths are still weak. They need a buff. Personally, I think something like, honestly, Immunity to Vigor would help, because then in a long sustained fight, Karen Wraiths bad stats would no longer be as much of an issue, where other units would start getting dragged down by their as their stats dropped. So I think that would perhaps be a good way to fix Karen Wraiths, but I'll take what I could get. I think it's an improvement. Tithe and Zombies dropped in cost. Makes sense with all the nerfs to chaff for the undead. Zombies and the Tithe were already not particularly popular in most builds because they're just so damn slow. So I think this is a good fix. For sure. I do think the Tithe, though, might be a lot less popular now. Because before it was 250 versus 150 gold, it was 66% more expensive. Now it's going to be double the cost of Zombies, which is definitely an issue. If you can get double the Zombies, you don't care about the stats on the Tithe. Like, sure, the Tithe does have more models and they got physical resist, but you don't really care about most of that stuff. So I feel like the Tithe might actually be almost underpowered at this point. Then the Vargulf getting buffed for no real reason again. There's some really odd. This patch is like one of the most confusing patches because there's some really great changes in here and some really garbage ones, and this is one of them. Vargulf should not be getting a buff. It's got ridiculous attack speed. It's got crazy high damage output already. The last thing it needs is more damage, and that's what they're doing. So there's just some. I just feel there's some really out of touch changes here. So it's really odd. Regardless, going onward for Tomb Kings, Katep dropping in cost, which is nice. Improvements to Skeleton Chariots, definitely very nice. Now they're even cheaper, which should be good. Carrion are a bit more expensive. I think that's fitting. The unit is definitely bit too powerful perhaps for their cost. Cascade of Souls getting buffed, the Bone Giant getting some slight buffs. I don't think that's bad. Not necessarily sure these are the right ways to buff these units, at least in the case of the Bone Giant, but I think the Bone Giant needs more accuracy, really. But it's something. Nekar Warriors a little cheaper, also a good change. They definitely were not worth their price tag before. Ketep a little cheaper. So all in all, I think these are good changes for the with Tomb Kings all over. They're small, minor fixes for units, but I think overall it's going to have a good sort of combined impact. Wood Elves had some big changes in here. Treekin have dropped in melee defense and charge bonus, but they've gained melee attack, which is nice. We're sort of normalizing them a little bit more. It's making them less one-dimensional, and I definitely think that's a good step. Glade Riders and Glade Guard have both gone down in cost, which I think is huge. These units were kind of overpriced before, and them being a little bit cheaper should make them a little more appealing. And Hagbane Tips have actually gained 3 AP damage now. In exchange for some normal damage, of course, but hey, the AP is nice. And they now do magic damage. So the High Elf or the Wood Elf magic spam is coming back, boys. Now only need Starfires to get their magic back. But I'm definitely very happy to see that Hagbanes are getting a slightly better here. They're getting some very good buffs. What I don't think is very good is the Wardens of Sithral nerf. They're going up in cost. And I could say the Hagbanes, that could help against undead factions because it lets you deal with ethereal units much better. It helps you win shootouts against enemy factions, especially like High Elves, for example. Now, if you can bring a bunch of cheap Glade Guard with Hagbanes and in support, you're going to be able to trade shot for shot with High Elves a lot more effectively. Stuff like that should definitely be a big improvement. Wardens of Sithral. And I actually think that might be one of the intensity, and perhaps it's not something I considered before starting this video, but I actually, now that I think about it, it could actually be the High Elf matchup would actually benefit a lot from extra AP on the Hagbanes, because Dragon Princes are such a pain. For being able to poison them, being able to bypass their physical resist, and being able to do more AP damage, not quite Starfire level, but more AP damage than normal, could be a huge boon against Dragon Princes in particular, and Bretonnian Cavalry, those two factions, and those are two of the most devastating factions against the Wood Elves. So I think these are absolutely great changes. I think this is very good improvements, and I think it's on the right track. Wardens of Sithral, not a good change. I don't see, they're not an overpriced unit or underpriced unit in my opinion. They're just a good unit. They happen to synergize well with Wood Elf Vanguards, but I don't think they should be penalized for that. Way Watchers, nerfed, perhaps not in the right way. I don't know if Rate of Fire is really the problem with Way Watchers, but it's something. Lizards, obviously nerfed, much like the Dark Elves, losing melee stats because Primal Instincts was changed. Krokar is now a bit tankier and has charge defense versus large and bonus versus large, which is nice to see. And Drop Rocks has been buffed, which is almost irrelevant because it's still trash. Besides that, Bretonnia, more charge bonus on Pegasus Knights of both flavors. Not very important in my opinion. Those units are already decent, honestly, just very niche. Men at Arms with Pole Arms are now more affordable. Only cost 500, I think, and a slight bonus, more bonus versus large. Definitely a decent improvement, I would say. They definitely needed it. Beast Slayers of Bastogne now have a higher bonus versus large, which is nice to see. And Companions of Canel got a MP cost decrease, which is, in my opinion, also not great. This unit is already amazing. This is like legitimately one of the best regiments of renown Bretonnia has. If not the best regiment of renown Bretonnia has. Like the only ones I'd say really compete with them are the Defenders of Fleur-de-Lis. They did not need a cost decrease, but you know what? I don't care. I'll take it. I play a lot of Bretonnia. I can abuse that. It sounds horrible, but it's absolutely true. I don't think this is a proper way to. I don't think they deserve it at all. Skaven Assassin now has Vanguard, and he's got a different trophy ability, and he's cheaper. Summon Plague Monks got corrected, which is nice. Chaos, Sigvald more melee attack, which I don't think is too important. For Sigvald doesn't do much besides survive, really. Forsaken and Demon Spew got more charge bonus, which I think is useless. Like Forsaken already do stupid amounts of charge damage. The slight boost isn't going to change much. Their issues lie elsewhere, like low HP and low sustain stats. So that's different. Marauder Horsemaster is getting a big buff to ammo, which I think is great. But Marauder Horsemen being nerfed is, in my opinion, horrible. I don't think they deserve less ammo. Marauder Horsemen are actually in a pretty good spot, I would say. So I think that's a bad choice. Chaos Spawn getting more attack. Swords of Chaos a little cheaper. Definitely very nice there. This unit a bit overpriced. and a giant, of course, being sped up. So do keep in mind some of these changes are the same for other factions, because of course things like the giant overlap, Chaos Spawn overlaps with Beastmen, and those changes are often universal. And I do think that some of these weaker, more readily available units definitely getting buffed is definitely a nice thing. But I'm really not happy about this Horseman change. For the Norskins, same thing as with the Horsemasters and Horsemen. Skin Wolves got a cost decrease, which is okay. I don't know if they needed it, but hey, you know, it'll make them more competitive with Fimir. Mammoths got a little more normalized cost-wise, definitely very good. The Feral Mammoth was a bit OP. The War Mammoth was perhaps a bit over-costed with the War Shrine, so hitting that nice sweet spot in between with these guys, slowly closing the gap will help. More melee attack for basic Minotaurs with Beastmen. Still not going to make them good, in my opinion, because they're still garbage. Like, the best version of the Minotaur by far is Shields. The other two Minotaurs are trash. And I don't know how much you'd have to buff the Minotaurs to make them really worth your while in the unshielded versions. Now, as for abilities, and we're kind of getting to the end game here. I know a lot of you guys are probably falling asleep by now. We're not really going to look at bug fixes because that's less important. But Primal Instincts was changed. We already know that. Going to be a huge change. I think going to make a lot of the cav, especially Dark Elf cav, far more competitive. A lot of magic missile changes. They now do a lot more explosive damage in exchange for normal damage by the look of it, especially for Shem's Burning Gaze, Hand of the Gods, and Gaze of Nagash. Now, Gaze of Mork seems to have simply gotten a bit of a nerf there, less projectile damage. They lost a lot of the projectile, the bonus Rich Large. Same thing with Vindictive Glare. We'll see if Vindictive Glare was overtuned, but looking at the stats here, it almost seems like Vindictive Glare might have been over nerfed. So we're going to see where it goes. I don't want Vindictive Glare to be useless. I don't want it to be OP to the point where it's almost one-shotting squishy casters the way it was before. But at the same time, I don't want this spell to be relegated to trash tier. So I'm hoping it sort of averages out somehow. But hopefully most magic missiles here are getting a bit of a boost. Comet of Cassandora is going to be doing more damage, which is nice to see. Not sure if this extends to the Enchantress's Chalice. It's not noted here, but maybe it does. The High King and Beloved Son of Britonia now don't have to have the units they're affecting be above 50% leadership, so it's no longer a true frenzy. Now it's a better frenzy that these buffs apply. Unfortunately, the High King still sucks because now Thorgrim's even tankier. He's going to be even more ignorable, and you're never going to see this come into effect unless your opponent's terrible. And Beloved Son of Britonia, well, this is actually a bit of a buff. I will admit. Lewin's very good. You often play Lewin in a risky manner, in my experience, so you will often actually get some value out of it. Contrary to what some people I know say, they kind of downplay it, but you can definitely get some value there. Warp Shard Armor, which I do believe is Queek's shenanigans. That gives you now applies -5 melee defense on top of the -18 armor, so great buff to Queek, alongside Dwarf Gouger being made more effective with more melee attack. So definitely some good buffs to Queek. Not sure it'll make him competitive enough with Ikit and Skrulk especially, but it's something. Slaughterer's Call now buffs melee attack by 9, so that's nice. Revenge Incarnate, as noted before, now no longer has max uses, but the duration I think is shorter. Advanced Horseman Speculum was nerfed, as was the Star of Avalorn. Excuse me. And Dreaded 13th and Drop Rocks was buffed, so not much to be said for these two, honestly. These are not particularly useful abilities. But Star of Avalorn getting nerfed is good. The spell is definitely a bit OP. So it being towed down a little bit at least is good. Van Horseman Speculum, well, we'll see. I think this is only an item on the Vampire Coast Admirals. I don't remember it being on anything else. But it's basically like Helm of Discord, so definitely good to see that toned down a bit. Regardless, there are some changes to modding as well as changes to bug fixes, but I don't think those are that important. Now, as far as this patch is concerned, what are my thoughts? My thoughts to wrap things up here, and for those of you who have stuck around through this whole video, I know it's a very long one and a bit boring and dry, but my thoughts are that this patch is odd. There's some great stuff in here. The new province, the new regions for the Empire, or all factions in general, the new added lores, the improvements to campaign AI, the The added mechanics from Bretonia, the reduced unit requirements from Bretonia, just Bretonia's rework in general, is pretty awesome. At the same time, changes like the increased level requirements for Pterodons, for example, now needing a tier 4 building, I think is god awful. It takes a terrible unit and makes it worse. I think some of the unit changes are very out of touch with what is needed or what makes sense. Like Vargeist getting more damage doesn't fix the fact that the unit is stupidly squishy. Vargulf's getting more damage, it makes absolutely zero sense because the unit is already stupidly powerful. It's arguably overpowered. The Dwarf Lord changes are, in my opinion, largely god-awful. Because most of these lords are already overpriced. Nobody brings them for sure. Nobody cares about this boost to survivability because nobody's bringing these lords really to be more survivable. Everybody ignores dwarf lords as is. Dwarf lords are basically just taking up space in your army most of the time, except the rune lord, and the rune lord was nerfed. So I think that's a horrible approach there. Or units like Campaigns of Canal getting a buff. Why? Or Wardens of Citadel being nerfed. Why? And I don't say this is sort of bash on CA, but I think there's some really out of touch changes here, and I'm not sure why they sort of implemented them. So it is what it is. I think by and large the improvements there's still a lot of improvement here, and I think by and large it's definitely still very good. But some of this is just odd. Some of it I just think is way on the wrong track and is not going to help these units at all. So yeah, that's kind of my 2 cents. But by and large, like I said, I think it's still pretty solid. Even for dwarves, for example, the gyrocopter buffs and the giant slayer buffs are definitely very nice. I'm still pretty happy. But yeah, just some oddball changes in there that were, as far as I'm aware, not really asked for and not really needed as far as anything I've seen. Including really competitive players talking about it, things. So, and at the same time, stuff like Invocation of Nek, which is arguably still overtuned, was not nerfed. Perhaps we'll see if it's less of an issue now that summons are nerfed for vampire counts. But yeah, it's some interesting stuff there, and we'll see how it impacts the meta for sure. I do think that, honestly, I don't actually think the meta is going to be too affected by most of these changes. Rune Lord is probably still going to be the most effective despite being more expensive. I think the one thing that's really going to help, or most likely happen in this patch, I think is Wood Elves might have a better chance now against High Elves and Bretonia. Their matchup against Dwarves is still going to be garbage. Probably terrible. But the other factions where their magic damage and poison is going to help, I think is going to be a big boon. I also do think that the vampire factions will definitely go down a notch. Because obviously their summons were a big crutch for them, and those being nerfed by a huge amount will hopefully scale them back a bit. Regardless, I do know I ranted very long and very intensely here on the subject of this patch. If you guys stuck around, I hope you enjoyed. I hope you found this informative. Be sure to check out the patch for yourselves. If you have any comments, any criticism, any questions, any input of your own, if there's anything you'd like to mention and think is worth talking about, be sure to put it down in the comments. I'd honestly love to hear what you guys think. I'd love to hear what you guys are expecting with this patch. See if your thoughts are different, or if you think I'm off on any of these predictions or whatever. Go ahead, throw it out there. I'd love to hear what you guys think. As usual, I do appreciate you all for your support, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye for now.